And so then today I wanted to just kind of go over, so this is going to be, if you're a seasoned investor, this is going to be really basic, like going back to kindergarten, but I wanted to just talk about how to run numbers on rental properties. Mostly because I talk to so many investors, and so many times, they say like, I want a good deal. And okay, what is your definition of what a good deal is? Everybody's good deal is different. And so I'm just going to give you how I run numbers on rental properties. This is not the way, this is my way. And I keep it very, very simple. So I thought that I might share that and try to answer any questions you might have, and maybe even learn from you guys. Maybe there's something I'm missing, and you can say like, hey, there's another, factor that you haven't thought about. I'd love to hear that. So this is my spreadsheet. It is so just basic. I see a lot of spreadsheets and they just go on and on for pages, and there's so many numbers. And I think that when you're first starting, especially, that's overkill. Like, that's so much information that you can't actually understand what's going on, or that's been my experience anyway. My husband is a data scientist and engineer, and he made this crazy spreadsheet with so many numbers, and I was just like, this is useless to me because I can't even tell like what I'm supposed to plug in and where the numbers are and what these different things mean. And so I made this one for myself to just look really quickly at a property. This is kind of the initial due diligence that I do, so all of these numbers are going to be checked and double checked, and then other things are going to be considered. But when you're just looking like, is this a good property or not? This is what I use. And so it's so basic. You just see income and expenses here on the left, and then what you put into the property, and then it calculates your ROI. That's it. Because that's really all you need to know when you're just starting out and you're trying to see if a rental property is good. That's going to be plenty for you to make a decision. At least the decision to start pursuing it. This is going to be plenty. And so you can kind of see this is a little bit over a 1% deal. The sales price is 100 over here. I just made this up. This deal doesn't exist, but this 100,000 is the sales price. Rent is 1,100. And then I just put, your fixed expenses, variable expenses, and, make sure that you put all of your closing costs, rehab costs, and down payment. Even if the house is turnkey and doesn't need rehab, you should still put about $500 because you're still going to need to do things like change the locks, or, there's going to be some little things that you have to do. So you might as well account for them from the beginning. So those first expenses are your fixed expenses. Now, these are the really easy ones to put into the spreadsheet because you're just going to look at the deal and get them. Property management is going to be the same based on who your property manager is. Your HOA condo fees are going to be in the listing, or you're going to be able to find those pretty easily. And then your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. In San Antonio and in Texas in general, you want to make sure that you have the right property taxes because our taxes are very high, and that can really kill your cash flow. And one thing you want to do if you're looking on the MLS, so when you're putting a listing on the MLS, you can use the tax data from the year before or from the current year. And a lot of times agents will use it from the year before. Sometimes they don't have the current year data ready yet, so you can't do anything about that. But for example, if I listed one right now and I put 2019 data, the tax bill is actually going to be quite a bit higher because taxes raised quite a bit in Bexar County this past year. So you want to actually get that number, not from the listing, but I want you to go to bcad.org. So that's bcad.org. That stands for Bexar County Appraisal District. And that's going to show you the actual taxes in 2020 on the property. It's also going to show you if that tax bill includes something like a homestead exemption. Because if the current sellers have a homestead exemption, that's lowering their taxes, but it's not going to lower your taxes as an investor. They're going to go up when you subtract that exemption. So just make sure you have the right tax number on, because it is a pretty big chunk of your fixed expenses. And then as far as property management, you want to make sure that you include the management percentage, and if they have a listing fee, you want to, well, they always have a listing fee, but you want to add whatever that listing fee is into your percentage. I usually just take the listing fee and divide it by 3, and then, you know, divide that by 12, or you kind of do that as a percentage there, because you're going to have a new tenant every 2 to 3 years. So, you know, hopefully not, but you may. So go ahead and put that in your numbers. And then your variable expenses. So the first one is maintenance costs, 5 to 10%. This is going to be just your everyday repairs. Your tenant is in the property and they call you or your property manager and say there's a leak, or the AC broke, or whatever the different little repairs are, the disposal's not working, you name it. You are going to have those repairs. I have never had a property go a year without needing some kind of repair. So you're going to have those, and the seasoned investors can definitely attest to that. I tend to use 5 to 10% based on the age of the property. So if it's a newer property, you know, if it's built in the 90s or 2000s, and, you know, it's in good shape, everything's, you know, pretty good, you can use a lower percentage. But if you're getting an older property that's, you know, 50s or something, you're going to want to bump that up to closer to 10%, because the older the property, the more repairs you're typically going to have. You can also kind of consider, like most of my properties have a brand new roof. So, you know, that can lower my maintenance costs, at least in the short term. I can use a little bit lower on that. So it's going to be super specific to the property, but you're going to want to make sure that that's in there. The same thing with capital expenses. Capital expenses are different from maintenance costs, because capital expenses are like major upgrades to the property or major fixes. So if you are replacing the roof, replacing the air conditioner, putting in new carpet, anything like that, that's going to be a major project, that's a capital expense. You're going to have those too. And you need to make sure that you're saving every month in advance, so that when that happens, you have the money there. And, you know, for us, we have that emergency fund. We call it kind of our property's emergency fund. And every month we're putting this money in. And so, you know, when our property suddenly needs a new roof, it's no big deal. The money's there. It doesn't feel stressful, and I don't feel upset about it. It's, yeah, we knew it would need a new roof, so we've been putting this money, and here it is. And that's part of investing. And that money was never ours to begin with. We were never expecting to have it, so it's fine. So just definitely make sure that you're putting maintenance and capital expenses aside and saving for that rainy day when it's inevitably going to come. And then the last thing is the vacancy rate. You can use 4 to 6%. I used to use 6% when I was first starting out, just to be on the conservative side. I know that I rent things out really quickly. I'm a property manager, so, you know, that's part of the perks of that. So I've started using 4 because my vacancy rate over time has been pretty low. But you want to pick something in that range. And the point of the vacancy rate is to cover the PITI when the property is vacant. So when you don't have a tenant in, a tenant leaves, and you've got 2 weeks before you know, another tenant moves in, you still have to pay the mortgage, and you still have to pay utility costs. So you'll have like a really small CPS and SAWS bill. And so you want to make sure that you have something set aside to pay those things, and that's what the vacancy rate does. And then, so here are the different types of ROI. If you look at my spreadsheet here, I've got 3 sort of different tiers of ROI here that I look at. So I've got the cash flow only, the mortgage pay down ROI, and ROI with appreciation. And so the reason I do that is because that kind of gives you 3 different ideas. Now the bottom one is your total ROI. That's going to include your cash flow, how much you're paying down the mortgage each year, and the appreciation. So that's, you know, your total wealth. How much did your total wealth increase from having this property? I don't really use that when I'm evaluating a property. It's on a spreadsheet, but I mostly use the cash flow and mortgage pay down because to me, appreciation is not guaranteed. It's likely, but it's not guaranteed. And I don't know how much it's going to be. You know, none of us know what the future, I mean, who could have predicted COVID, right? Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So I am a very conservative person, so I don't count on appreciation. It's lovely if it happens, but I wouldn't buy a deal with that cooked into the deal, if that makes sense. Not a rental property. Now, totally different if you're doing like a BRRRR deal or a flip, definitely a very different thing. I'm more talking about just your kind of boring standard buy and hold rental property. So what I use is this cash flow and mortgage pay down, because to me, that is the amount each month that my wealth definitely increases. I've got cash in my hand, that is definite wealth. My mortgage went down, that's definitely lowering my debt. So that I can count on that, if that makes sense. And so that's the number that I look at when I'm evaluating what's my ROI on this deal going to be. And then I know a lot of investors that just use the cash on cash return. And so they want that to be, I've got a kid in the background. I don't know if you can hear, but I'm almost done, so I'm going to ignore him until I finish. So the cash on cash return is just that very basic, the annual cash flow divided by your total down payment, closing costs, and rehab costs. So all of the money you put into the deal goes on the bottom, and the annual cash flow goes on the top, and you divide that, and that's your cash on cash ROI. Super basic. This is not like, you don't need a finance degree. You don't need to be an engineer or a physicist or a mathematician. Even I can do it. It's just basic division, right? So that's how you calculate those things. I put it into my spreadsheet because that's about my level of Excel knowledge. I can divide. But that's what I would look at when you're looking at a property. So you need to decide for you what a good deal is based on these things. Are you going to focus on the cash on cash, the total ROI? What is your strategy? It changes for everybody in a different situation. So I have investors who are out of the country and they don't even care about ROI. They just want to keep their money safe. And then, you know, I have BRRRR investors who want to have this very high ROI. So it just depends, but you need to be able to decide that so that when you're looking at deals, you know what your standards are, and also so that you can articulate those to realtors, wholesalers, or other investors to try to help you find the kind of deal that you're looking for.